Hi, I'm Wanda from Alanda Craft, and today we're making a Christmas table runner. Now for this table runner you will need 20 squares of 5x5 in one colour. You'll need 20 squares of 5x5 in a contrasting colour. You'll want some backing fabric and a half a yard of that. And you'll also want approximately a piece of batting that's about 19 inches by 44 inches. You're also going to need a quarter of a yard of fabric for your binding. So I'll just put the batting and the backing aside, and we're just going to work with our squares because we're going to make some half square triangles. So we take one of each colour and lay them on top of each other, the right sides facing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line from corner to corner. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew a quarter of an inch from that drawn line on either side. So you can see here that I've sewn on either side of the line. And now what we'll need to do is we need to cut on the line that we drew. So just place your ruler down and cut the piece in half. Now when you open it, you'll get a half square triangle. In fact, you'll get two half square triangles. So just set the seam towards the dark side, and I'm just going to do that with all of my half square triangles. Now the next thing we need to do is to trim our half square triangles. So I'm going to trim them back to 4.5 inches. Now if you're not sure how to do this, I do have a video on how to trim up half square triangles, and I'll put a link in the description below. Now you're going to do this with each of your half square triangles, so you're going to press them and you're going to trim them. So the next thing we're going to do is to lay out our squares out in the design as shown here, and then what we'll do is we're going to start sewing them together. So I'll take the first square, place it right sides together with the next square and sew it with a 1/4 inch seam, and then I'll do exactly the same with the other two squares. So 1/4 inch seam down the edge. Now once they have been sewn together, I'm going to put the two together and sew again with a 1/4 inch seam. And once that row's finished, I'll come back and I'll do the next row, and I'll continue all the way down the table runner doing each row in turn. So now I'll just show you how I've pressed the seams. So I press all of the top row one way and all the second row the opposite way, and I continue alternating down the table runner. So now we'll just turn that back over, and I'm going to start putting the rows together. So one on top of the other, right sides together, and you can see because of the way we've pressed it, our seams will nest together beautifully. So now once that's done, I will sew it together with a 1/4 inch seam. So now that I have everything sewn together in rows of 2, it's time to add the rows together. So I'll take the top 2 rows, place them right sides together over the next 2, sew together with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm going to skip the middle section, and I'm going to go down to the other end, and I'll put those 2 rows together and again sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Now once that's all done, then I'll come back, and what I'll do is I'll sew them to the middle rows. So now my rows are sewn together, it's time to make my quilt sandwich. So I'm going to put my piece of backing face down on the work surface, and then I'm going to lay down my piece of batting, and finally I'm going to add my table runner top. And then I'll just smooth everything out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the top 2 layers back, and I'm just going to spray some adhesive spray. This is temporary adhesive spray. And I'm going to spray the backing and give it a spray, and then I'm just going to smooth down the batting on top and get out as many wrinkles and bumps and lumps as I can, and then I'm going to spray the table runner top, and again I'm going to smooth it down. Now do it in half sections so that it's easier to work with. Now just turn it round, and then I'll just do the same thing again, spray the backing and then spray the table runner top. Now once that's done, I'm going to give it a press, and I'm going to press on the back, and I'll flip it over, and I'll also press on the front. So just make sure that it's all nice and smooth without any wrinkles. Okay, so now I'm also going to pin. Now the reason I pin is because I just like the added security of having pins and the adhesive. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ditch around the diamond in the middle, and I'm also going to ditch around the outer edges, as you can see where I'm pointing. And I'll continue doing that all the way down the table runner. So I'm only doing simple stitching, but if you're going to do some heavy stitching, you will need to add a little bit more fabric to your backing and your batting. So now it's time to trim it up, and I'm going to line up my ruler on the 4.25 mark, and I'm going to just trim the edge off. Now I know my seams are straight, and so that's why I'm using that first seam line of the square, and I'm just going to do that all the way around. So line it up on 4 1/4 and just trim the edging. Okay, so that's what it looks like when it's had the edges trimmed. It doesn't everything look nice once it's got the edges trimmed. Now it's just time to put on some binding, and I do have a tutorial on how to add binding, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. So I hope you've liked this tutorial. Give us a thumbs up if you did, and please subscribe to the channel.